Good afternoon, councillors, those here in attendance and those who might be tuning in wherever you may be. Hope you're having a great start to the year. And in opening today's meeting at 1 p.m, and in the spirit of reconciliation, we, the citizens of Launceston, recognise that Launceston is situated on country of which the Tasmanian Aboriginal people have been owners of for over 35,000 years, and on which they have performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge the Aboriginal community for today, their living culture and unique role in the life of this region, and offer our deep appreciation of their ongoing contribution to our community. Thank you. Now, in opening the meeting at agenda item number 1, we also do have, for attendance and apology from the Deputy Mayor here this morning. And I would like to make a note of the agenda at agenda item 15.1, which was the transfer of UTAS Stadium to Stadiums Tasmania. Subsequent to the agenda being prepared, we received a request from Infrastructure Tasmania and Stadiums Tasmania to provide a presentation on the planned upgrades to UTAS Stadium. Now, this will occur next Thursday, which will be the 1st of the 2nd, 24. So accordingly, we would like to list it for the next council meeting on Thursday, the 8th of February, 2024, to enable this presentation to occur prior to any decisions being made by the council. There are no mayoral acknowledgements as a part of agenda item number 2. Declarations of interest, though, as we move through to agenda item 3. As a councillor, we must declare any interest that the councillor has in a matter before any discussion on that matter commences. Do I have any declarations of interest here today? There being none, we'll move forward to confirmation of minutes. Recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the City of Launceston Council held on the 14th of December 23 be confirmed as true and correct record. Somebody to move. Councillor Britton, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Council workshops at 5.1. Council workshop report from the 18th of January 24. The recommendation is to note council workshops conducted since the last council meeting. These council workshops were the UTAS Boland Street update, homelessness strategy, revised Greater Launceston plan, development assessment panel framework, York Park UTAS Stadium update, and I believe that was all so far as a part of this agenda. Do I have somebody to move council workshops? Councillor Gibson, a seconder. Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Gibson, would you like to speak to any? Councillor Dawkins? Any further comments around the table? Councillor Walker.
Question, if I may. Thank you, Chair. Just noting that we were providing an update on Boland Street. Is that information going to be provided to the public?
I have made recommendation to our officers that I would like some more formal communication to go, and particularly to those businesses affected, to whether that's, again, I know our officers have been very proactive in going in physically and speaking to some of those businesses, but to ensure that there is clear communication from the updates that we now have, it would be nice to have that circulated to the community also, as well as in person, in the media, whatnot through. Thank you. Further questions, comments? There being none, Councillor Gibson to close. Okay, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. Motion is carried. We don't have any councillor leave of absence applications identified as part of this agenda. So moving from agenda item 6 to 7, we also don't have any community reports. The community seems to be out there enjoying themselves this early part of the year, which is really good. Public question time at agenda item number 8, 8.1, questions on notice. We do have a few that we've accumulated throughout the Christmas recess period. 8.1.1, Ray Norman mural, Patterson Street East car park, with the answers as a part of the published agenda. 8.1.2, Malcolm Cohen around the clean air strategy. 8.1.3, Robin Smith, meeting disruption procedures. 8.1.4, furthermore to Robin Smith's question previously, offensive graffiti. And a further question from Ray Norman at 8.1.5, council delegations. Moving to 8.2, which is public questions without notice. Noting that the rules and regulations for public questions without notice are displayed and available upon entry. This is not an opportunity for discussion or debate. You may ask a total of 3 questions each, and when asking your questions, if you would please state your name and suburb. Now, Mr. Baines, I do have a couple that have been submitted prior. If you don't mind, I'll have Rosemary come to the microphone first, if that's okay. Thank you. And you're a gentleman, so I understand that will be okay.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mayor. And first of all, I'd just like to wish the gentleman, our CEO, all the best. He reminded me just not long ago that I was here at his first meeting, and now I'm here at his last. So, all the best, and thank you for the many years of service to Launceston City Council, and wish you the best. I'm sure I will see you. Your CEO in Hobart, so well done. My question, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'd just like to say, my questions are no disrespect to the answers that I've received in part I'm going to refer to yourself or to any council staff, but I just think it needs to be on the public record. So my questions are with regard to the very large tree that fell on the 14th. Is that not good? Probably don't need a microphone. I can speak quite loudly.
Okay, for those at home.
Oh, okay. Right, thank you. My question is with regard to the very large tree that fell from the City Park onto Brisbane Street on the 14th of December. You might be well aware that I've had experience with a tree falling on my home in the past, and I appreciate the trauma and what can happen. This tree that fell right across Brisbane Street on a very still morning. Actually, it wasn't windy and rainy. It may have been the day before, but it wasn't when it fell. On a very still morning at around 3 a.m, had it fallen, as I've mentioned, at about 8:30 a.m, there would have been a lot of tragedy. Cars are parked there or are lined up there at the lights, and no one would have been able to go anywhere. So council have been very fortunate, and I'm hoping very much that they learn from what's happened. I guess the concerning part for me was reading in the Examiner on December 15, trees in City Park are regularly inspected for safety reasons, and this tree was recently given a clean bill of health. As you'll appreciate, Mayor, I wrote and asked the council, having had experience with falling trees and having seen this one not come down but not long after. On the 21st of December, I received from the council, City of Launceston used the nationally recognised Quantified Tree Risk Assessment, QTRA, and I've been told it's towards best practice, method to determine risk. Our arborists undertake the scheduled tree inspection and apply this risk assessment on a quarterly basis with an additional check prior to major events. That sounds absolutely great if it happens. My understanding, or my interpretation of reading that, is that it is misleading. My understanding is that the trees that receive the QTRA, and I have looked into the QTRA quite significantly, I've printed it up, I've read it all, and I've noted the different colour schemes and how you go yellow, green, orange, red, depending on your risk assessment. My understanding is that trees actually only use or have that assessment if they're already determined to have a problem. And that the majority of trees, and I do appreciate there are 30,000 of them, or around about that, in the City of Launceston. You can't do it to every tree. But trees are actually only visually assessed. And if the visual assessment looks like there might be something wrong, then it gets the QTRA. I'm not sure about anyone else around the table, but listening to that first paragraph, it does sound like all your trees, or your serious trees, actually get that assessment, which obviously they don't. So am I concerned? Yes, I am. Do I want council to do better? Yes, I do. And do I think that response was good enough? No, I don't. So I would simply ask that council do what they intimated they actually already do on the 21st of December. And my question to you, Mr Mayor, is will the council in the future at least look at the very large old trees that do border our parks, border our streets and our homes? I don't expect you can do every tree, you can't. But there are certainly a number of very large trees, very old trees, that I think could have the QTRA assessment. I met with 2 council staff in the park who were fantastic. And, you know, they pointed out to me the situation, but this tree didn't come out by the roots. The tree that fell on my house came out by the roots. This tree was rotten. It actually broke off. And I did send photos to all the councillors. You may have seen them at one stage. I don't know how you determine that. I don't know. And with your microwave, I think, you know, how you look at these trees. I know there are certain instruments you can actually get to look at trees or trees that might be old and damaged. So my main question basically is, will the council in the future pay more attention to the large trees, particularly in our parks that border the streets, so that we don't be not standing here, but you know, have a coroner's inquiry into what actually happened to people? I think we're very fortunate that it didn't happen. So if I could have an answer to that question first.
Yes, thank you, Rosemary. And I really do appreciate your activism that you're doing, your proactiveness that's coming forward, as well as a part of this process and your lived experience too. So, Rosemary, the answer to that is simply yes. And with the integration of our urban green strategy that's coming forward and the trees that are a part of that strategy, there will be an assessment and a reassessment as to the processes when we are looking to where we put trees, where those trees are currently, and the hazards that it does stem to our community. So the answer is yes. As a part of the urban greening strategy, there will be a review of the assessment process. And as you said, we do work with our experts here. We know that they have over 40 years of experience in arbitrary and doing work with trees, but the visual inspection and the way that they are referred to, as you said, the world standard practice will be reviewed.
So the QTRA, as has been mentioned to me, will occur on many of these large trees.
Oh, I can only speak for what the assessment part will come through to the councillors, a part of that assessment, and the assessment process will be reviewed as a part of the urban greening strategy. If the recommendation from officers come forward to say that, yes, this is something that needs to be done more proactively, then that will be what comes to the councillors.
Because it's already said in the email to me that you do it. That's the concern that I have.
Oh, we do it, but it has to go through that first initial inspection to be referred to the process.
The visual inspection.
Yes.
Well, I'm not satisfied, but I'll leave that one there and I'll pursue that further later.
Yeah, I might even refer to the CEO for some further clarification. Yep.
Thanks, Rosemary. Just clarifying, so you would like us to look in more detail at those trees that front the road at the moment, that, you know, obviously at City Park, just specifically? Or
and Princess Square as well.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, Michael, that I'm looking at the trees that are large and old, not every tree, but there are some trees when you look, and I'm not an arborist by any means, but I can walk into the City Park and I can look at a couple of very large elms and thinking, my gosh, I hope they don't come down because they're going to take a lot of people out. You know, there are certain trees that might be over 100 years old that maybe there are some trees we should be looking at.
Sure.
Yeah. Not every tree. Sure. You can't look at 30,000 trees.
No, well,
yes.
You know, I'm not stupid.
I think we agree.
We can have a specific look at it and do a report, not necessarily the full study that you're referring to, but we certainly could have our people have a look at it to obviously assess the concern that you're raising and to be able to just respond you know, with a more specific report. So we can certainly look at that.
I think we need to learn from the near miss that we actually had on the 14th of December.
And as you said, Rosemary, I think it is important that we act proactively. We don't want to be acting reactively to something that could be, as you said, detrimental to our community.
Well, it would be actually a tragedy to our community, to probably families. So my third question is simply on the, in April when I came, I was told in a few weeks' time I would be hearing what was happening with the Birchwoods Katie's building. Now, it's a bit more than a few weeks. It's now 2024, and I'm just wondering, can I have an update, please? Because many people are asking me in the community, what is actually happening with the Birchwoods and Katie's building? And it's still boarded up, well, many months, 8 or 9 months later than I was told I'd be going to hear.
Yep, absolutely. And I think Mr. Baines might have an interest in this question answer also. So,
well, yes, I do, but I also like to add something to Rosemary.
No, Mr. Baines, just if you don't mind, I'll answer Rosemary's part of the question first. And if you have a subsequent question as a part of your 3 questions, it might spur something.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'll just answer Rosemary's question first.
Oh, sorry, I thought when she sat down it was all over, Rover.
No, she's just sitting down because I waffle sometimes too.
Right. Where you go.
So just in respect to Rosemary's question around virtuals, the information that you were provided with in April is still correct and it's still current. I would like to make note here as well that... let me finish, please. So whilst that information in April when you asked your question around the contract and what's being facilitated through virtuals, that information is still correct around looking at who's taking over, the sale, the proposed development of that. And the further development to that now is, but I want to make a note first that council didn't own or didn't take ownership of the building for the whole entirety of the time that it's been empty. The council stepped in and took ownership and leadership in that development. That was a previous council. This council in its term has acted proactively and has accelerated that process. And I'm really pleased to be able to tell you today, as part of your question, that only as of Friday, the further negotiations that have come forward with that process have been cleared, and there is currently developing that contract to be signed in the next fortnight as to the next stage of where virtuals will be reimagined into that development. So the contract is developed, it's been negotiated, and it will be signed hopefully beforehand, but in the next fortnight.
I did have a funeral, but I won't continue. It's just that I was told that you had a preferred contractor back in April.
Yes. Right. Well, the preferred contractor has been taken a part of that. It's now been the negotiations have happened with the contract, and it will be signed in the next fortnight.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my first question was actually
just your name and suburb. We'll start fresh again.
Yeah, but I'll start again because I'd like to add something to what Rosemary said about the trees. And I think it would be most helpful if the old trees in City Park had a plaque on them which explained what sort of a tree it was, how old it was, and that would give some information. Perhaps the schools would bring their children around and have a look at the trees, and it would feed them some information and maybe push their interest in trees generally.
Fantastic.
Anyway,
now, Mr. Baines, I'm going to take that as one of your questions.
No, it wasn't a question.
Yes, it is because I want to give you some information.
It wasn't a question. I'll tell you what to do.
I want to provide you with some information around that we've been working with Graham Ross from Better Homes and Gardens, who is very interested in our city park, and this is one of the recommendations that he has brought to us. We're working with our officers and our general managers around perhaps not a plaquing system physically, but a mapping system where a QR code can be taken by the kids and it tells you about the individual trees. And he responded back to me this week that he would even be interested, even with his very busy schedule, to come down and be a part of that media release and a part of that initiative, because he is very worried also that all of the information that's been accumulated over decades will go missing with people who aren't perhaps taking up horticultural interests like they did in his generation.
Okay, thank you.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good to
fantastic.
Me. If it works, yeah.
All okay. Right. I will look for you to be one of our test subjects.
My first question was, will council put up virtual for public auction?
Well, I think we just covered that one, that it is already up.
Yeah, if that all falls in a big hole...
The contract will be signed in the next fortnight.
Oh, yeah, that's guarantee, is it? Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
Okay, but why did council pay the former tenants of Victoria's Cafe a sum to vacate early when virtually no work has been done in that area? Quite some time.
Sure. So there's been a lot of work that's been happening internally, and I understand that the community hasn't been able to see that visually, but there is a big black fence around that now. And the work is starting to spill out externally. A part of the redevelopment a really important part is that foyer area where the tenants in there have been. As to the financial contributions, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to take that one on notice as a part of the process to get you the correct information. So I'm not sure about that financial, but we will get that to you as a part of the published agenda with questions on notice.
All right, thank you. Well, my last question was how much was paid in this transaction by council?
And I'll include that in the previous question so that we've still got our 3 questions there, taking the one about your trees, and say that we'll provide that information with your question prior to that.
All right, thanks very much.
Thanks for your patience and your understanding. Any further questions without notice? Thank you. That was a bit of fun. Okay, so we move out now into Agenda item number 9, which is Planning Authority. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in the agenda. Item 9, Planning Authority. We've got 9.1, which is 22 Stone Street, West Launceston. Subdivide one lot into two. Construction of a dwelling on the proposed lot 2. Now, I will start before we get to recommendations with speakers from the public. Now, I do have some that have identified. Philippa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I felt compelled to write in relation to the DA as a resident of Stone Street. I should have said that up front, apologies. The proposal seemed quite out of character with the streetscape. It's an extended platform with poles, steel poles that jut out. So as you come up Stone Street, it will stand out quite considerably. The street itself is one of the earliest streets in Launceston, a lot of Federation homes, and it really wouldn't be in keeping with the street from an aesthetic point of view, with the social value point of view. And I note some of the comments in the report from the council officer that also concur with that. I think really the main point is that it isn't part of the streetscape there in relation to the existing properties. Other developments have happened, but this is just not in keeping with that style. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Phil Reynolds of 8 Stone Street. The hill between Margaret and Hill Street provides Launceston with an absolutely stunning backdrop, with Arbour Park, trees, dwellings dating back to the late 19th century. It's all too easy to see it every day and not notice it. It is spectacular. It should not be spoiled by a house that is totally out of context with the area. I think the report on the development application is excellent, and I commend the officer for producing it. Thank you.
Thank you. A further speaker, I have Danica.
Hi, Danica McDonald of Design to Live, designer of the project, so I'm speaking against Council's recommendation. I acknowledge that there is significant site and topographical constraints in this area. And we've designed the dwelling as best fit with regard to our client brief. In early communications with planning prior to the advertisement period, we were advised that the application would likely be okay, so we were under the impression it would be approved, so it is disappointing to receive a recommendation for refusal. Some of these concerns, we feel that if they had been addressed earlier prior to advertising, we could have made suitable modifications in conjunction with the planning advice, including a revised plan from subdivision to strata, the addition of privacy screenings, and the potential of cladding from the balcony to the ground to hide the structure. The other concerns, such as setback distances, we feel that these are justifiable considering the topography of the area, and whilst visual impact has been listed, we feel this is unreasonable ground of refusal. If a dwelling was built on this lot within the acceptable building envelope, the visual bulk and impact would be considerably greater than what we've proposed. And due to the lot's corner location, there's no avoiding visual impact completely here. However, as you can see in the diagrams in the agenda, our proposal significantly reduced impact compared to the acceptable building envelope. And just while I have the floor, I feel that as designers, we're at a disadvantage now with these applications and future applications regarding the representations. We were notified we received 3 for this, but we weren't given a redacted copy or a summary. We feel that that's really hard for us to then, as designers, mediate and alleviate concerns through the council rather than coming all the way to a council meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Danica. Were there any further speakers? Okay, there being no more public speakers, we will move to the recommendation. So the officer recommendation is to refuse the application. on the following grounds that do not meet the performance criteria. The proposed subdivision does not have sufficient usable area dimensions suitable for development of a dwelling and the provisions of private open space. Proposed Lot 2 is also inconsistent with the pattern of development existing on established properties in the surrounding area. The proposal does not have a frontage setback compatible with the streetscape, as the dwelling will cause visual impact in respect to the apparent scale, bulk and proportion when viewed from an adjoining property, and as the dwelling is not compatible with the amenity and character of the area and does not provide for sufficient area or outdoor recreation, planting of gardens and landscaping for private open space. Somebody to move the recommendation to refuse. Councillor Gibson. A seconder, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Gibson is the mover.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to move this item. I think it should be said in moving the item that it's very rare that we arrive at the position of council officers recommending a refusal of a DA. And I certainly hear some of the comments pertaining to process, which I'm sure the Acting General Manager might be able to answer some of those specific questions at the end. There's opportunity for us to reflect and perhaps correct or improve some of the things that have been brought up there, then we can do that at the end. For me, you'll note in the officer's report that a portion of land which was previously part of the road reserve was agreed by this council to close, a resolution to agree to close a portion of that at the end of 2020. In 2021, that road reserve was purchased from the Crown. Importantly, I think whilst one doesn't necessarily have a direct correlation with the other, at the time the road reserve was closed, agreed to, and the land was purchased for the explicit purpose of adding to the recreational space of the property. Now, people can choose to do whatever they like on their land as time develops, but I think contextually it's important to understand that that was the request for the closure. It's certainly what was recommended, and presumably the sale was enacted for that purpose. That being said, here is someone who owns a portion of land with an additional portion which is now part of it, and they want to do what they want to do with the land that they have. So for me, this is not a reflection on the design. The design is great, and in another circumstance would perhaps be approved in a different location or with some consideration to the four items, the four planning discretions that are being triggered and considered today. So want to make really clear that for me, love the design, think it could work, think it's fabulous. It just doesn't work for the size of the space. It doesn't work either with regard to the four standards, which the Mayor, you heard reference with some of the decision for refusal. Importantly, the conclusion, point 6, it just demonstrates to us that there is insufficient land for the nature of the development as proposed, and I expect that that is where planners have landed with regard to this recommendation. It is very rare, as I said in my introduction, for us to have a planning DA for refusal. So that is why I'm moving it today. In finishing, I would like to ask some explicit questions just with regard to, was the applicant provided with the opportunity to respond to the those three representatives?
General Manager Ogulin.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Our initial approach when we were assessing this leaned towards potentially approving the application, and this was communicated with the applicant. However, at the point at which we decided on our assessment that it was clear that we would probably likely need to refuse it, we did notify the applicant at that point too that it would likely be refused. So that was later on last year. At that time that we made the decision to refuse, we couldn't get permission to extend the timeline to then go back and potentially consider a redesign of the property.
Thank you. And noting the written representations that were received, what ability was the applicant given during the process, either before you indicated you were going to support it or before you indicated you weren't, for them to take on board those representations and potentially make changes?
We'll just take up the officer here.
Good afternoon. So when the application, we did receive representations, and council has made a decision that we don't actually advise, we don't provide redacted copies of representatives to applicants anymore. So there have been previous decisions made with our legal representation has also advised us not that we weren't able to do that. So we don't send redacted copies like we used to, or provide them. With this application, there was a time limit, and so there was a limited opportunity in a way to give some mediation, well, it's a redesign of the proposal. We had, when the application first came in, there was a number of questions that I asked via the further information request, and I was provided with additional information, which was borderline as far as approving or anything, but it was sufficient enough to go forward and advertise the application, which is what we did. We've got the representations, and I've did a further assessment on the application, and it was decided, as part, like, it's not just me in the office who makes these decisions, it's part of our whole office, and it was decided the application be refused. And so, because there were some administrative issues that did not provide that time to do a mediation, mediate, but also at that time we had asked for further information at the start.
Thank you, Officer Mainbridge. Councillor Dawkins is the seconder.
May I ask a question first,
yes,
please? Following on from that line of conversation then, was it ever recommended that this DA be withdrawn? As we've stated, it's very rare for it to be refused at the table. Was another process offered?
Officer Mainsbridge?
Yes, there was the opportunity. So when we asked for an extension of time, because council wasn't to be held till today, there needed to be extra time given to the application for us to consider. Initially, we weren't given the date till today. So, no, I forgot what the question was. Oh yes, so that was one of the options. They could have withdrawn the application or taken it to, the next meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't need to go over anything that Councillor Gibson said. That's entirely accurate. It is very rare. Generally, there are other processes that kick in rather than have this quite public discussion around a DA. But this is the appropriate action in this instance because of all the elements that we've heard. So all I really need to add, I guess, is that this building could be built on that hill in a different block. That visual impact that the proponents have discussed, this house is absolutely within the statewide planning scheme. And really, if the block was bigger, it would be able to be built. There are some concerns about the closure of the road. Of course, we want to see that when someone comes to council and asks for a road closure to amend their block, that they're doing that for the reasons that's been outlined, rather than for a very short future plan to develop the block. There's nothing that we can do about that. We have to take people's word at face value, but this is concerning to me that it has been such a short turnaround from some extra outdoor space to enjoy to a proposal for a further development.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. A further question from Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the question is to the planner. Looking at the two associated documents that have been provided to us, one from the applicant and one from the council planners, there seems to be a difference regarding the site coverage. One of the reasons given is that it's not consistent with the established properties in the area having a certain percentage site coverage, and on the planner's report, it has the 12A Stone Street is 288 square metres, which is a similar size block, has coverage of 39.73. In the report provided by the developer, Designed to Live, says that 12A has coverage of about 55%. So I'm just wondering which is right. Is it 39 or 40% in round figures, or 55% of coverage?
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Senior Town Planner.
I didn't have time to properly assess your question, Alderman Harris, Councillor Harris, sorry. So I can't give you a correct answer for that right at this moment.
Okay. Further questions or comments around the table? Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for outlining where we stand on this. I was one who voted against supporting the excise of that land and selling it from the Crown. And it's primarily for reasons such as this, although we're not to know, as has been previously pointed out. When someone does acquire additional land, of course, their ideas might change as to what they wish to do with it. In this particular case, I can only imagine being, fairly intimate with the area, that there's a lot of basalt rock straight under that grass there, and it will be quite difficult to excavate down, and therefore, if you are going to build, it would be easier to build something above that. And hence, the reason why. What I'm not happy about is seeing, some perceived confusion between what's being proffered by the design people as opposed to our planning staff. So I'm not suggesting that anyone's at fault there, but certainly I like to think that the opportunities are provided for people knowing that it is going to be refused or recommended for refusal and the reasons why. Seeing the specific representations is probably not necessary because it is summarised in our report, and I'm sure those reasons are given at the time that refusal is being suggested. But I'm not privy to all that. All I'm saying is I hope that is not a feature of future planning decisions in any way, shape or form. I agree with the recommendation for refusal. I can appreciate someone wishing to take advantage of this opportunity, but the land size precludes such a development. I think that's fairly obvious and fairly straightforward. What was mentioned, that could have been another approach doing it as a strata title, and that is true. It's in fact a question that I did ask when we inspected the property itself. Is this a precursor to another approach to get something such as this built on that land? Again, we don't know the answer to that. We can only deal with what is in front of us today. What is in front of us today clearly does not meet the planning scheme, and I will not be supporting I will support the recommendation and not support the development application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, firstly, I haven't got a specific question. I'd like to make a statement.
Yes.
My attitude has been and will continue being that I don't want to sit in judgment on my community. I think the young people who are wanting to develop that should be commended for being innovative. On the other hand, and I think they should be encouraged to go back to the drawing boards, or from me at least. I'm not speaking for me. I appreciate the residents or the objectors. I also love Launceston, and I do think that that particular building would be out of character for whatever reason. But let's not allow the fact that the building is, that this particular design, in light of all the things that Councillor Walker has said, that we should discourage our developers from looking at that site. But I can't support it on the basis that it is out of character. We've got some beautiful homes there, and it would really stick out. But I would encourage that our developers have a good look at it and see if they can come up with something else that would be more appropriate. And I'd like to, the last part of this is, I think that both parties need to know that we all do care and we do look at these things very seriously. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments around the table? Any further questions? We do have some further clarity to your question, Councillor Harris. We've been able to use the time to find sufficient evidence into an answer for you?
It was assessed in the report as 54.56 is the correct assessment.
Councillor Harris, a further question that you have?
No, I might just speak.
Yep.
As my other colleagues have said, I also was excited by the design of the house when I saw the original plan. However, when you looked at it in the reality of it sitting in the actual streetscape rather than the nice architectural greenery, it clearly will stand out. But that should not be a reason for not agreeing with it. It does seem to me we're trying to build a house on a lot that is perhaps too small, and some extra thought into how that could be achieved should be considered by the applicant. It could be they move the garage in underneath at the front to perhaps create a different style of housing. They could step the front of the building down so that it doesn't tower over the street and lowers itself. Or in fact, they could even split the block sideways and build behind the existing house and actually have the garage for the existing house.
Councillor Harris, if you don't mind, if we just...
These are all
I don't
things,
think we need to give advice to the
no, these are all things that are
designers.
possible. And we do want to say to any developer that we want to keep our city growing. We do need to make use of the available land without encouraging further broadacre development on the edge of the city. And so with a somewhat heavy heart, I will in fact be supporting the officer's recommendation, because clearly I would like to see more inner city development of this, but perhaps it's not quite the right one for this site. And I look forward to seeing what they might come back with later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Yeah, agree. Okay, there being no further questions or comments around the table, we'll go to the vote. So we're voting on, yes, it is a little different to what we have done. We are voting to refuse. So all of those, oh, you want to close? Yep, sure, sorry.
Thanks for the opportunity to close. I think it's really important to understand that this recommendation comes to the council table because it is recommended for refusal. That is the job that the planning scheme sets out for us to do. So it's not about us being in judgment of the design. It's not about us being in judgment of one side versus the other. It's about us fulfilling the role that says that when an odd recommendation for refusal is determined by planners, it comes to council laws to be considered. I think probably the CEO and the acting general manager have taken some items of administration, some areas for improvement. We don't like questions around the process and questions around whether or not the applicant has been privy to representation issues, etc. At this particular time. That should have been handled previously. Whether there was an agreement to extend the time or not, I think they're all learnings. We don't want to be in that situation again, and I'm sure that's already been jotted down and taken on board. For me, and hopefully for other colleagues, this is about the fact that there is not sufficient area for the development of the dwelling to proceed. The nature of it is that if it was to proceed, the bulk, the sheer scale of the dwelling would have a negative impact on those neighbouring residents, and for that reason should not be supported. And I urge councillors to vote in favour of the recommendation put forward by the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. So putting it to the vote then, the vote. All those in favour to go with the recommendation, which is to refuse the application. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. (9.2). We'll just give ourselves a second. 9.2 is 12 Queen Street in Vermey, which is the demolition of 2 outbuildings, construction of a secondary residence. Before we get to the recommendation, I do have a noted speaker, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane McDougall. I'm the architect from Launceston Architects. So I'm actually obviously for the recommendation for it to be approved. It's basically, we decided to build where the existing garage is, which is on a boundary and also on the back street, Graham Street, because there is already an existing building there. It's a next door to the neighbour's driveway, so the impact is similar to what's there, but it has to be higher because it's, and civil dwelling, it's a granny flat, and because of the floodplain, it needs to be a certain height above the ground level. And we positioned it there because there's a really big birch tree on the back of the property that we want to retain. So, so basically, the design is higher on the boundary. We've tried to keep it as low as possible because by putting the road and the kitchen along the boundary, so we have a lower ceiling at that side, so that it has minimal impact on the neighbours. And so it's been quite a considered design. It's a relatively small footprint, similar to the garage, slightly shorter along the boundary and slightly wider along Graham Street. So it's going to be as similar as it can be to what's already there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Now we move forward to the officer recommendation, which is to approve. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Pentridge? A seconder? Councillor Harris? Councillor Pentridge, as the mover, would you like to speak? Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris is the seconder.
Thank you. Yes, an interesting design concept for a granny flat, something that we don't seem to see many of here at Council to actually approve, but we may see more in the future. As the speaker spoke, Jane, the positioning of this over the footprint of the existing garage, but retaining the birch tree, actually is very good planning. It meets the planning scheme with the need to be raised because of the previous flood level, but also does minimise the impact. And in fact, I wasn't able to join the bus trip with the town planners because I was away. I went out there and had a look at it by myself and could see very easily how this would fit in the streetscape without disturbing it. So I think this is a good development and something that perhaps we'll see more of in the future as far as granny flats go.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Gibson.
Look, for me, it's about condition 3, which sees the non-reflective exterior finish applied to the external boundary walls. I'm not sure if that came as a result of the conversations between representors and applicant. If it did, that proves that a process whereby one is able to consider the representations made by the neighbours, it's a great outcome that can be achieved. Regardless, the non-reflective exterior finish must be finished in dark muted colours to the satisfaction of council. The inclusion of that, I think, is appropriate and in some way takes to the issue of the representations received.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Further comments around the table? I'll come back to you. Councillor Walker?
Question, if I may, just in regards
to... Yep.
Yeah, probably the only one planning issue. The proposed development will be is outside the building envelope for the zone and is therefore assessed against the performance criteria. It is considered that the proposal satisfies the performance criteria. If the planner could just explain how that satisfies the criteria in that case, I suppose. Yeah, like I said.
So with it being outside of the envelope, how does it? What was the?
Yeah.
How was it assessed to meet the criteria?
Yes.
Okay. So you're talking about criteria 8.4.
0.1, 0.2, and P3.
P3, yeah. Okay, cool. So how are we? The question is, how are we assessing it to be outside the building envelope? Is that correct?
Yeah, just understanding that.
So that's prescribed in the scheme in terms of what the minimum setback is and the height. So primarily in this instance, it's exceeding the height because it's right on the boundary. So the provision is for a 3-metre wall. This is a 5-metre wall. So it's outside of that envelope pretty much straight away.
Yes.
Yes.
And so then how are we approaching that by saying that?
How are we saying that it's visually appropriate, or
how are we saying that it actually, satisfies the performance criteria?
Well, as you'll be aware, it doesn't meet the acceptable solutions, so it then becomes a performance-based assessment, of which there is a suitable pathway in the scheme for us to assess that. The report outlines how we've assessed that, and part of that assessment or mitigation, if you like, of that impact, as described in the report, is for the treatment and that condition applied to mitigate that impact. Yeah, we certainly acknowledge that it is outside the envelope, and that's what we've reported upon. And it doesn't meet the acceptable solution. But yeah, so we're not pussyfooting around that, if you like. But yeah, it is a performance-based assessment. Yeah.
Now, Rachel, I feel in line with the question, it would be appropriate for you to have some further insight into conversations that have been around how that came about.
Yeah. So
a question similarly to Councillor Gibson.
Yeah. So part of the assessment was that we did attend the representors' property and got to see that impact, and also got to see it from a second-storey part of their dwelling. Noted, as what Jane has said and is in the report, there is an existing building directly on the boundary line which is already 3 metres of height. It has an extremely reflective surface currently. It's painted white, and if you may recall from the bus trip, for those of you that were present, you could see that, and we had the opportunity to stand and view that from the neighbour. So we certainly have had that conversation. Yeah.
Great. Any further questions or comments before we get to the close? Councillor Walker to speak.
To speak, thank you, Chair. And look, that is the one area, I suppose, of contention here. Understandably, for one particular neighbour, they do have a double-storey. They have a double-storey property themselves, but they also have already on one boundary a double-storey property. There's some sort of vegetation there that gives them some shielding. In this case, I don't believe there's going to be a window along that boundary. So again, the privacy is not an issue. It's more the fact of creating, I suppose, on at least two sides now, a fairly imposing sort of boundary in this case, but a near boundary on the existing double-storey. Certainly, double-storey is the only way that these things can be built in that flood-prone area, and there are plenty of examples in that particular part of Invermay. So I will support the recommendation. I understand the concerns, and I certainly appreciate the efforts that are being made to mitigate those concerns. I think in the end it won't make a significant difference to that particular neighbour. It will make some difference, and hopefully some of that is positive, as has been mentioned. Let's hope that we can continue to see these efforts being made. I suppose that sometimes it can be a win-win. It might not be perfect in an ideal world. We'd probably, none of us have any neighbours really, would we? But in reality, this is what we deal with, and I think in this case, yeah, we have got a win-win situation, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge to close.
I think, thank you everyone. I think this is my only concern. I have no concerns about the development, but we are very fortunate, all the owners are very fortunate, that the particular site lends itself to this development. It's 2 street frontages, right? It's not going. There's a park beside it. It's not going to affect anyone unduly. And the only reason I'm commenting is I am a little bit wary or careful of setting precedents. I mean, the same thing in another area might not be as welcome as what it is on this particular occasion. And the fact that it's 2 streets next to a park, I think it's a great concept, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Putting it to the vote then. Recommendation to approve. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. So council now no longer sits as the planning authority as we continue to move through the agenda to announcements by the Mayor. At 10.1, just noting the 17 engagements that were attended over the recess period, and to acknowledge the continued amazing work from our students and teachers, and to thank the councillors who were able to assist by delegations as to going to a lot of those presentations throughout this end of year period, and also the incredible events teams that are out there providing premium opportunities for our community and abroad, those visiting our state. And of course that stems right through particularly the nicer weather perhaps, and we look forward to seeing how our winter programs continue to evolve also. Into councillors' reports at agenda item 11. Do I have some Councillor reports. Councillor Kai.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 16th of December last year, I was invited to join the Nepalese Society of Northern Tasmania for their Bachelor graduation ceremony. I thoroughly enjoyed being part of the ceremony, filled with dancing, speeches, awards and prizes. I'm privileged to be part of this very special celebration 2 years in a row to witness the little graduates' dedication to grow year after year. Now, on the 18th of December, on behalf of the City of Launceston, I had the great pleasure to officially launch the Connected Women's Multicultural Cookbook. It was a very special morning filled with colours and activities from women of many different cultures filling the Town Hall reception room. It was such a joy for me to be part of this sharing of stories, achievements and emotions at that morning's of connections. A celebration through music, dancing, display, food and the vision of stunning traditional dresses. Hopefully, there will be many more opportunities for the Town Hall to open its doors to celebrate the amazing diversity and contributions of our multicultural citizens. Now, I've got a book here. So this is the Multicultural Cookbook and it is available if anybody wants to purchase one at the Red Cross Mowbray office. Now, yesterday was our first citizenship ceremony for this year. Deputy Mayor Mackenzie and myself joined the Mayor in welcoming 88 new Australian citizens to our community. We had conferees from 26 countries who pledged their alliance to Australia. The Tramshed Function Centre was filled with excitement and joy from both adults and children with their families to celebrate a memorable day for our newest Australian citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Further councillor reports? There being none, we'll move through to councillors' questions on notice. At 12.1, we'll see in the published agenda Councillor Pentridge around Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal appeals and also the Gilmore Street flooding. And moving forward through to 12.2, councillors' questions without notice. Do we have any councillors' questions without notice? There being none, we'll move forward through to committee reports at agenda item 13. 13.1, the Homelessness Advisory Committee report with recommendation that the council receives the report from the advisory committee that was held on, their meeting was the 28th of November, moved by Councillor Walker. I preempted that one. A seconder, Councillor Professor Raze. Councillor Walker.
Still thinking about the previous item. Thank you, Chair. Looking at all those wonderful figures in terms of TASCAP representations that we've made. The Homelessness Advisory Committee report from the 28th of November. Certainly we did hear from some very interesting guests, most notably Julia Mangan, who's the CEO of Catholic Care, who more recently was working in South Australia in the homelessness space, and really brought some great insight into the way that the various agencies are working together with their state government and local councils could bring about significant results in terms of identifying people who are at most need and who are most appropriate at being able to be rehomed successfully, if that makes sense. It's a complex type of equation that we're talking about, but nonetheless, their success, I suppose, relies heavily on the fact that homes are available. And I think that is probably the biggest difference that our agencies are facing at the moment in Launceston is simply the availability for homes. And that's, probably not something within our remit, but nonetheless, the process that they go through to assist people to transition from homelessness to being housed, to having a home, is one that it provides great insight. And I'd even recommend that at some stage the council might wish to welcome Julia Mangan or invite her to speak to the councillors in a workshop. And certainly, she's based in Hobart and is working actively with the government as well on that front. Secondly, Dr. Catherine Robinson, who's at the University in Launceston, certainly doing research into that area and has offered her assistance wherever possible and collaboration in Launceston Council's efforts to have active, meaningful data that helps us to lobby and to advocate for what services we need. Indeed, for helping us to plan for what services we can provide ourselves. So they're the types of things that have been happening, including the development of a homeless strategy policy, something that councillors did see at the last workshop, something that I will continue to advocate that council must make meaningful contribution to the facilities and services that are available, something that we already do as a council, and we can all point to the things as a council, material things that we are doing in that respect, but something that I will continue to advocate for is the council's contribution in that area, considering the many dollars that we spend in other areas, and the world has changed, and I think everyone knows that. It's how we respond to that change that matters most. So I recommended that report to the table. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Professor Raze is the seconder. Just hit your buzzer. Thank you.
I'd like to mention how wonderful it is to see the expanding role of the Homelessness Advisory Committee, and how much you can see the membership in more than 15 to 20 people now, but also the passion it's provided by all members of the committee, and also inviting guest speakers with experience, and we'll see, so we can learn from people who already have achieved so much in helping people who are experiencing homelessness. I also commend about how the Launceston City Council have taken great strides in taking an active role in helping people experiencing homelessness, and having the published strategies, which we have discussed in our workshop last week, just an example of how much hard work we have been achieving this year. And I'm hoping this is just the beginning, and I believe that the council will take even more active role in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments around the table? Councillor Pentridge?
Of this, but I have to commend both the gentlemen. I think the attitude of our community is changing. I, for one, was struggled to understand where this was all going to go.
Sure.
But the persistence of a lot of good people has actually turned the corner, and I think a lot of the community now is starting to realise that that maybe we can all do a little bit more to assist these people. So well done, gentlemen. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. No further comments? Councillor Walker to close? Nothing further? Okay. Putting the motion to the vote, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 13.2 is the Access Advisory Committee report. The recommendation is to receive the report from the meeting held on the 6th of December. Do I have somebody to move? Councillor Dawkins? A seconder? Councillor Harris? Councillor Dawkins is the mover.
Thank you. In spite of communications to the contrary to say that we would have a quorum on the 6th of December, we failed to reach one again. So there is no report today.
Okay.
I welcome the strategic review of our internal and external committees. I think it's really important that we re-engage with our disabled people's community and the agencies that support and advocate for them. It's like the Homelessness Advisory Committee, it's very important work. This is our year to really figure out how to make this work and to welcome feedback from those agencies and individuals that have been on that committee, so that we can build a fit for purpose, appropriate committee that we will get much greater engagement from this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Anything as the seconder, Councillor Harris? Any further comments around the table? Nothing to close, Councillor Dawkins? Okay, all of those in favour then? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Tender Review Committee. As a part of 13.3, The recommendation is that Council notes the decision of the Tender Review Committee to accept the tender submitted by Gradco for the Launceston Waste Centre Borrow Pit rehabilitation. Somebody move. Councillor Harris is the mover. A seconder. Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the Tender Review Committee met before Christmas about the rehabilitation work to be undertaken up at the Launceston tip. The $1.2 million or thereabouts quote was somewhat less than had been anticipated, which is always a good result. I guess this will be the last tender that the committee will look at on behalf of the council, because from today we will have all of the tenders come back for the whole council to look at. So just a change while we review, as Councillor Dawkins said, the committees that we have as a structure of council. So this was our last one to look at. It was a good one, good to save some money on what is a very important work up there to rehabilitate where we have been digging fill and other needed things from our land there behind the waste centre up at Mowbray. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker as the seconder. Any further comments around the table? Anything further to close? Okay, all of those in favour of the motion? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 13.4 is the Transport Committee meeting held on the 14th of December. Recommendation is to receive that report. Mover Councillor Harris, a seconder. Councillor Pentridge, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, this was the committee meeting held on the 14th of December of the Transport Committee. You can see the 4 items that were discussed there. The main one that I'm sure the public is most interested in is the continued interest in the Kings Meadows connector slip lane from the state growth owned freeway onto the connector road that runs down past Bunnings at Kings Meadows. That has remained an agenda item for the committee, and despite the fact that the Transport Committee will be in recess whilst we undertake the review, this item will be continue to be pursued with state growth, and some options are being looked at about how the intersection, which really has uneven traffic flows on it, can be upgraded or improved so that those people who get caught on the freeway at a dead standstill at certain times of the day can in fact access that roundabout safely. So we're working with State Growth to look at the options there and see what they can help us with. And we haven't forgotten about it. We'll continue to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder.
No, thank you.
Cool. Any other comments around the table? Councillor Walker.
Yes, certainly I have brought up that subject a couple of times now over the last 12 months. I'm concerned that whilst I don't know if any accidents have been reported in that place, that would be welcome. But of course it is one of those things that has been brought to my attention that unfortunately if there is an accident, it probably will be a serious accident. So, you know, any communication between State Growth and Council would be welcomed in that regard. Their timelines, their future plans. I know that there are other developments in the area that may or may not impact what is decided there, but it's one of the few places. I mean, look, you'd probably say it was similar to when there was a queue going out to university in the morning on the East Tamar Highway. That used to bank up, and accidents did occur there. I know people who got rear-ended in that situation. I don't wish to be the bearer of bad news or, predicting, unfortunate events. But having been in that situation myself, seeing the backup, bringing myself to a standstill very quickly at about, 5:15 p.m, I would appreciate if there is any further information that could be shared. Thank you. I suppose that's a question.
Yes, no further information can be shared. The CEO and I met with the Deputy Premier last week, and this was a part of the agenda item for us as council to take to the Minister, and there was conversations around how further development of the extended slip lane. It was brought up from council around signage further about saying queue traffic ahead. Those sorts of conversations were had. Whilst I have no preliminary conversations around timelines and so forth. It was brought up and it was minuted and a part of the agenda that went forward as a part of that meeting. Yeah. Further comments or questions around the table? Councillor Harris to close. Okay, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 13.5 is the Cultural Advisory Committee meeting with the recommendation to receive the report that was held at the meeting of the 6th of December. A mover, Councillor Britton. Second, Councillor Walker. Councillor Britton.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It's all there in the report. There was a presentation from Shane on the QV mag there in your report. We had some convict era fines and where we can potentially display those, and an update on the Kings Meadows public toilet. But just in particular, I wanted to say there was a presentation by the 10 Days on the Island people, and it was good to see when 12 months ago when I first got on the committee, they might have just been finding their feet a little bit, and it just seemed as though that was the first time I really saw everyone collaborate. There was a lot of good things that we passed on to those guys, and it was, I think all the committee members had a good go, for lack of a better word, and it was good to see. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Councillor Britton. Councillor Walker is the seconder.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I do rise to, and I couldn't attend the last meeting. Excuse myself for fear of passing on a cold to the rest of the room, but I know it's been mentioned a few times today, a strategic review of our various committees, and I have worked hard, as well as Councillor Britton, on this committee to engage the members of that committee. We've had quite a bit of turnover. We've had some excellent community members. So I have my concerns about this review and the timing of it, and I suppose the rolling out of it, because I was unaware until such time as committees were put into recess that this was going to occur. Now, I would have thought that it might have been something that should come to this table for discussion. That did not occur. So I will express some disappointment, and I'm chair of 3 committees. I'm on 6 or 7 committees. I've lost count, actually. So I do a fair bit of work in that area, and I'm not saying that that's better or worse than any other councillor, or indeed yourself, Chair, but what I am saying is that that does take time and effort, not just from me, but from other committee members. So I will express my concern publicly that we are going into recess for 3 months, and that at the end of that, I'm not sure what the goal exactly is. So I'll leave that as a question, if you prefer to answer. What is the goal of that 3 months recess, and what do we have to achieve? And how can we avoid losing the momentum that some of us may feel that we have on the committees that we serve on?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Thank you for the question, but I do believe that some of the answer to that question was expressed in a previous councillor's report around not finding quorums and how some council committees aren't working. I don't see anyway that 3-month period is something that has to extend that long. That's a figure that has been put forward. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be some committees that potentially throughout this review period come straight back. We have some committees that are continuing due to the safety concerns around our community and the momentum that has been brought forward, and I appreciate your ability to provide in-committee support and reference to momentum that you're feeling as a part of the Cultural Committee as well. These are all factors that are coming in. There is some recommendations that have been passed on to the CEO already. So to see some actions that are going forward with that, there's not a process to say that some committees will not be brought back quicker. There aren't to say that some committees won't be brought back at all. That's just a part of this review process. And I really do appreciate the work that you and all councillors do and the feedback that you're able to provide.
Thank you. Now that I've asked that question, I'll speak to this the motion, and I will thank the members of the Cultural Advisory Committee, even though I wasn't at this. I did attend remotely to this meeting via some kind of digital connection. I'm not sure what it was, and really do appreciate the work that our council officers are doing in engaging the ideas and the efforts of our committee members. For example, Dr. McDonald, Abby McDonald, is our representative on the process of selecting a successful artist for the mural on East Patterson Street. So there's another example of how that committee work is having an impact in the community, and shows that chain of responsibility and community involvement, I suppose, that committee provides. So I look forward with eagerness to the results of that. As you can see, there was an update in the meeting in regards to that, and also the Kings Meadows public toilet block public art project, which has been selected. I don't know if it's been completed.
Yep.
It's fantastic news. I might have to go and use the toilet later. Thank you.
Spend a penny. Great. Councillor Harris.
You couldn't have given me a better intro. I was going to speak about the Kings Meadows toilets, mainly because I was one of those who were responsible for getting them to put there in the first place before getting on council. But I also used Snapsend Solve as an app to report the graffiti back in March of last year, which then resulted in the decision to provide public art on the toilet block rather than a blank canvas for the graffiti artists to use. And I can report that when I used it myself recently, it hadn't been tagged or defaced in any way. Hope it's still the case. It's been a week or three since I've been there. But yes, it is something that I guess it shows the process. The process works if you start with a Snapsend Solve, which anyone can use to log a job. Council will then look to see what is the best way to resolve it. It might have taken us nearly 9 months to do it, but it has now been resolved. And hopefully we will see similar artworks on public toilets. And for me, the best one that I would start with is the one down in City Park, but I'll leave it at that. I won't get off topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any further comments? There being none, Councillor Britton to close. Okay, putting the motion to the vote, then all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Moving into agenda item number 14, Organisational Services Network. 14.1, we have 23-24 budget amendments, and we have the recommendation, which is for councils to approve by absolute majority changes to the council's 23-24 statutory estimates and adjustments made during the 1st of November to the 31st of December in that 23-24 budget. Do I have somebody to move? Councillor Harris? A seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, this is something we do as a council regularly. Stuff gets put in an operational or a capital budget, and during the year we need to move money from one budget to another. The breakdown of what's being moved around is shown in the report. There's quite a lot. Some of it is because money was underspent. Other cases, jobs were reprioritised. And in some cases, additional money has come in, and so we've been able to bring forward some projects, including a couple which are perhaps well worth noting despite their small value. The George Street, Balfour Street curb outstands will in fact make it much safer when approaching that intersection, particularly from Balfour Street, to pull your nose out to look to see for any cars. At the moment, you really have to poke your nose out and hope it doesn't get wiped by a car going down the hill, and there's a number of those at Bladen Street and also in Glendew Street opposite the old Peyton's Ball building. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, so those are good things that we have. I think it's almost business as usual for us to do this. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions on it, but I do think it's just part of our due diligence to keep an eye on what is going on with the movement of the money and ask everyone to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Gibson is the seconder. Any further comments around the table? To close, Councillor Harris, anything further? Okay, all of those in favour? No. Okay, sure, fine. Okay, so you will abstain. Yep, okay, so all of those in favour of accepting the budget amendments, that is all councillors bar Councillor Pentridge, who is abstaining. Thank you. So the motion is carried. Great. 14.2 is lease, Veteran Car Club of Australia. So we have the recommendation here that council, again by absolute majority, agrees to lease an area of land situated at 47 to 67 Lawrence Vale Road, South Launceston, to the Veteran Car Club of Australia. It also authorises the leases to be formalised, and further 2, 3 and 4 recommendations in there as well, which all pertain to the lease. Councillor Gibson has moved. A seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Gibson.
Thanks. I'm going to move to support the officer's recommendation, other than to say it is a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, if you were starting again, would you necessarily have a car club next to a children's play space? Would you allow for the sheds to be used for other purposes? I'm not sure, but certainly it's something that's been raised with me just in terms of their synergies. Nonetheless, what the Veteran Car Club have done with the space in terms of increasing the footprint, in terms of growing their membership, in terms of working with and for community is absolutely wonderful. It raises, though, the question of how it was that 40 years ago, in some respects, it's easier for an organisation to get on side and get on board with council finding them a home than what it is now. A bigger question that perhaps needs unpacking, particularly if you're a band or if you are a gemstone organisation or you are a sport and recreational offering that is finding it hard in Launceston to find a home. Nonetheless, the work that's been done with this lease is appropriate. It should be supported. They've been model tenants, and I applaud the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Harris is the seconder. Nothing further? Any other comments around the table? Councillor Pentridge?
I was just looking at some photos here. I think it's a great idea. Those people, I'm not sure what Councillor Gibson was about the objections, but I went up there recently to where they had an ambulance in the name of Launceston. That was one of our first ambulances, and the people should be commended. They restored it absolutely beautifully over a long period of time, finding bits and pieces everywhere. And I think we should be encouraging people to do that. So they've done a great job and good idea. So.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Now, I think that Councillor Gibson was just reflecting some of the correspondence that had come to him from the community. There were no particular objections, just to clarify. Councillor Walker?
Yes, and I won't attempt to paraphrase Councillor Gibson, but if I understand him correctly, they have done a wonderful job there. They've been model tenants. It may not be the most appropriate place for that club to be at, but I'm sure if the council were to find a more appropriate place, that they would be amenable to at least discussing, you know, a future location. At present, this is the way it is. This is a 5-year lease to continue that arrangement. Council obviously is in the middle of restoring the bicycle centre. Maybe we will find at some point that there is a future use that we would like to see there, but I'm sure that can be arranged at a suitable time. In the meantime, you know, we'll wish them all the best for the next 5 years of tenure.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the table? Anything to close, Councillor Gibson?
Thanks for those that have made a contribution. Yes, certainly no objection. Just if you were starting again, things might be different, but isn't that the case with a lot of things? You learn, and certainly as long as everyone can work together and everyone feels safe at the time they're working together, then you can achieve great things. In terms, though, of this lease, they've been model tenants, their membership has grown, the outputs and outcomes, connections with community, with our own QV mag, and as Councillor Pentridge said, the restoration of one of our most iconic vehicles is to be congratulated, and I hope councillors will support the lease today.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. So putting it to the vote then, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Moving to 14.3, which is disposal of interest in land at 18A High Street, East Launceston, for electricity infrastructure easement. So we do have the recommendation here that council forms an intention to dispose of an interest in land by granting an easement over part 18A High Street, East Launceston, to Tas Networks, and it also requests the CEO furthers the process. Do we have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Harris, a seconder. Councillor Britton. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, an interesting one. This is a easement that is required by the electricity provider for our swimming centre up there at the Windmill Hill for the changes that we've made by moving from gas to heating and solar. So the reality is this is very much in our own interest to allow such an easement over the land, to allow the electric provider to provide the necessary upgrades that is required because of our change of what we're doing up there as far as heating the pool is concerned. So I do hope that everyone around the table is able to support this particular easement and motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Britton is the seconder. Anything further around the table? Nothing further to close, Councillor Harris? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 15.2. Thanks, Jeff. 15.2, appointment acting CEO. The recommendation is that Council appoints Shane Eberhard as the acting Chief Executive Officer from the 3rd of February 24 until Council determines the appointment of a new CEO. Somebody to move. Councillor Gibson? A seconder? Councillor Dawkins? Councillor Gibson? Listed. Councillor Dawkins? Any comments around the table? Councillor Pentridge? Just hit your button.
I won't question at this point in time the appointment.
Yes.
But what I'd like to see in the future, and that this table makes these decisions instead of the decisions being made by other people.
So just to be clear, Councillor Pentridge, this table is making the decision. It's just the recommendation that's come to this table. I understand what you mean, though. I do, and I take note of that. But it is still this council making the decision.
Maybe that's a good opportunity. If this was a delegated authority, if it was passed on by delegated authority, I think in light of the fact, and maybe this is a good opportunity also to wish our city manager, for me at least, all the best. It might sound a bit.
No further personal comments need to be made.
Yeah, and we need to. One of the things we haven't discussed was the delegated authority.
Sure.
And what happens in the future.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's okay. We'll talk. If that is a view of the council, we'll talk about that, and that might be a potential workshop or notice of motion, whatever. Okay. Further comments around the table? Councillor Walker?
Yes, just to be noted that the legislation, the relevant legislation, is included in the item this afternoon, and it does provide different pathways in order to do that. I suppose that might be something that a councillor could question as to what is the appropriate pathway in this instance. The one we have, I'm not sure if it is the recommendation based on the first part of the pathway, which is the Mayor's recommendation. But I suppose I am asking that question, is this the Mayor's recommendation, i.e. the initial pathway that's outlined, or is this another pathway in terms of how that recommendation comes into existence? I suppose a procedural question.
Sure. Yep, passing that to the CEO.
Thanks, Mayor. So the Mayor is able to make an appointment where the General Manager is absent. In this case, the General Manager is not absent. The General Manager has left the organisation. Therefore, the Council needs to make the decision to appoint an acting.
So I think further to that, Councillor Walker's question, and it's one I'm interested in also, is with this recommendation and the way that it has moved forward, where's the recommendation coming from, is Councillor Walker's question. Is this recommendation coming from the Mayor, or is it coming from the existing CEO?
Well, it's coming from the Executive, who's discussed it and put forward the candidate that they felt was best qualified to fulfil the role.
Great. So. Thank you for the clarification. That's fine. Any further questions or to speak?
To speak, if I may.
Sure.
Only to certainly add my appreciation of our current CEO's work. I do hope that the Mayor can create an opportunity where we might suspend standing orders before this meeting is finished in order for councillors to express their thanks to the outgoing CEO. But I certainly, I suppose this item brings that into focus. So, but I'm happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the table? Anything further to close? There being none, we will move the recommendation to the table for a vote. All of those in favour? All of those against? So that was all councillors present in favour, opposed to Councillor Pentridge was against. Does that make sense? The easiest way to say it? Got it? Thank you. Okay, so we move through to closed council 16. The recommendation is that council moves into closed session to consider the following matters, which is the confirmation of minutes, and 16.2 is the Edinburgh Street pavement. So what we're going to do now at item 17 with meeting closure is someone to move a motion that the table provided reflects the decisions made in closed council. We'll just wait for that table to pop up so we know what we're voting on. Nice and transparent.
Point of order, Mayor. Before we close the meeting, I would like to suspend standing orders in order to acknowledge the work of the CEO. Oh, I know.
Yeah, we are out of closed. I can say from commentary prior to this meeting, yeah, that's okay. We are in open now.
Yep.
That fanfare has been, or moments of gratification have been said to be unnecessary as a request from the CEO. But I think the notion is appreciated. So we'll continue. But thank you. Okay, so we've got the table. So somebody to vote that that's the table that we voted on in close, Councillor Harris. Somebody to second that that's the correct table, Councillor Gibson. All of those in favour? Approve. The motion is carried. Thank you. And in doing so, we close the meeting with the next meeting date to be held here at 1 o'clock on the 8th of February 2024. Thank you, councillors.
But no rush. We'll get to you. But the next thing is to go back to